The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into what should have been my driveway. Instead, I found myself staring at a wall of freshly cut lumber stretching 8 feet high across the road. A massive wooden fence blocked my path completely, with official-looking signs posted every few feet. I sat in my car for a full minute, engine running, trying to process what I was seeing. This was my private road, the same dirt path I had driven 1,000 times to reach our family property, the same road my grandfather had used for medical appointments and grocery runs while I was away on business. My hands shook as I parked and walked closer to read the signs. Bold red letters declared this area under HOA jurisdiction. Permit numbers and county stamps covered every surface. Warning notices threatened legal action for unauthorized access. My blood turned cold as the reality sank in. I called my grandfather immediately. His voice sounded tired and defeated when he answered. "Grandpa, what is this fence doing across our road?" "They put it up 3 days ago," he said quietly. "Right after you left for your business trip. I have been trapped here ever since." The word trapped hit me like a physical blow. My 78-year-old grandfather, with his heart condition and weekly medical appointments, had been imprisoned on our own property for 3 days. No access to his doctor, no way to get groceries, no contact with the outside world except his old landline phone. I drove to the nearest gas station and parked, then spent the next hour making phone calls. The HOA management company answered on the 4th ring. A cheerful receptionist transferred me to someone named Karen Matthews, who identified herself as the HOA president. "Oh yes, the road acquisition," she said in a tone that dripped with false sweetness. "We purchased that access road from the county through a perfectly legal process. All the paperwork is in order." "That road has belonged to my family for 60 years, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not according to county records," Karen replied smoothly. "The road was classified as abandoned maintenance, which allowed us to acquire it for the benefit of our community. I suggest you contact a lawyer if you have any concerns." She hung up before I could respond. I drove around to the back entrance of our property, using an old logging trail that barely fit my truck. Grandpa was waiting on the front porch with a stack of certified letters in his lap. His face looked older than when I left a week ago. "These started arriving the day after they put up the fence," he said, handing me the letters. "They want us to comply with HOA regulations now, landscaping requirements, architectural standards, monthly fees." I flipped through letter after letter, each one more demanding than the last. Immediate compliance, mandatory inspections, threats of legal action for non-cooperation, all addressed to property that had been in our family since 1962, long before any HOA existed in this area. "Grandpa, this land has been ours since before I was born. How can they just take our road?" His weathered hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "Your great-grandfather built that road with his own hands in 1952, back when this was all farmland and forest. We have the original surveyor documents in the safe." That evening I called Karen Matthews again. This time, her tone had shifted from fake sweetness to barely concealed hostility. "Listen carefully," she said. "The Sunset Hills HOA has legal jurisdiction over that road now. Any attempt to bypass our authority will result in immediate legal action. We have lawyers on retainer and they specialize in property disputes." "This is our family land," I protested. "Was your family land," she corrected. "Times change, properties evolve, communities grow. I suggest you adapt or consider relocating to somewhere more suitable for your lifestyle." The call ended with a dial tone that felt like a slap in the face. As I sat on the porch that night, watching Grandpa struggle to hide his worry, I realized this was not just about road access. This was a calculated attack on our family heritage, timed perfectly for when I would be away and vulnerable. Someone had been watching us, planning this, waiting for the right moment to strike. The war had begun, and I had not even known we were under attack. Sleep did not come easily that night. I sat at the kitchen table until 3 in the morning, surrounded by property documents and my laptop, diving deep into county records and legal databases. What I discovered made my stomach turn. The HOA had used something called an abandoned road maintenance ordinance to claim our road. According to their filing, the road had received no county maintenance in over 10 years, making it eligible for acquisition by adjacent property management organizations. The paperwork was flawless. Every signature was in place. Every legal requirement had been met. But there was one problem with their perfect plan. Our road had never been a county road to begin with. "Grandpa," I called out the next morning, "I need to see those surveyor documents you mentioned." He led me to an old safe in the back bedroom, one that had belonged to his father. Inside, wrapped in old cloth, were the original property surveys from 1952. Hand-drawn maps showed the road as a private access way, built entirely on our family land with our own money and labor. "My father cleared every tree by hand," Grandpa said, running his fingers along the faded survey lines. "Hauled every load of gravel with his pickup truck. The county never owned this road because we never asked them to. We built it ourselves." I spent the morning scanning and photographing every document. Then I started making phone calls. A legal consultation with the first attorney I contacted was not encouraging. "Fighting an HOA is expensive," the lawyer explained. "Even if you are right, you are looking at $50,000 minimum, maybe more. And the local judges tend to favor established community organizations over individual property owners." "But we have the original surveys," I protested. "Surveys from 1952 might not hold up against recent county filings," he replied. "HOAs have significant legal resources, and they know how to work the system." That afternoon, I drove through the neighborhood surrounding our property, looking for anyone else who might have faced similar problems. What I found was worse than I had imagined. 3 houses within a mile of our land sat empty with "for sale" signs in their yards. All 3 had been on the market for over a year, according to the real estate listings. All 3 had been outside the original HOA boundaries until recently. I knocked on doors and talked to neighbors. The stories were remarkably similar: unexpected legal challenges, sudden claims about property boundaries, expensive compliance requirements that appeared out of nowhere. Families who had lived peacefully for decades suddenly finding themselves in legal battles they could not afford to fight. "Karen Matthews has been systematically targeting every property around the HOA boundaries," explained Mrs. Rodriguez, whose elderly neighbor had sold his house for half its value after an 18-month legal battle. "She calls it community expansion, but really it is just a land grab to increase property values inside the HOA." That evening, Grandpa and I sat on the porch while he shared stories I had never heard before. How his father had spent 3 summers clearing the road by hand. How the whole family had pitched in to haul gravel and pack the roadbed. How neighbors from miles around had come to help with the final grading. "This road is not just access to our property," he said quietly. "It represents 3 generations of our family working this land. Your great-grandfather built it so We would never be dependent on anyone else for our basic needs. As he spoke, I noticed a car driving slowly past our property for the third time that evening. A dark sedan with tinted windows, moving just fast enough to avoid seeming obvious. When I mentioned it to Grandpa, his expression darkened. "I have seen that car several times this week," he said. "Always driving slow, always looking toward our house." The pieces started falling into place. The timing of the fence construction during my business trip was not coincidental. Someone had been monitoring my social media, tracking my work schedule, waiting for the perfect moment when our property would be most vulnerable. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my recent posts, pictures from my business conference, check-ins at airports and hotels, a complete roadmap of my travel schedule posted online for anyone to see. "They planned this," I said, more to myself than to Grandpa. "They knew exactly when I would be gone and how long I would be away." That night, I realized we were not just fighting for our property rights. We were fighting for the soul of our family heritage against people who had turned legal harassment into a systematic business model. The road my great-grandfather built with his bare hands was now a battlefield, and the enemy had every advantage except one. They had underestimated how far we were willing to go to protect what was ours. Karen Matthews arrived at our property the next morning with an entourage that looked like a small army. 2 HOA security guards in matching uniforms, a county inspector with an official clipboard, a photographer to document everything, and Karen herself, dressed in a crisp business suit that probably cost more than our monthly groceries. I met them at the fence line, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "This is private property. You do not have permission to be here." Karen smiled with the kind of coldness that could freeze water in July. "Actually, we do. As of yesterday, your property is subject to HOA oversight due to your use of community access roads. We are here to conduct a mandatory compliance inspection." She handed me a stack of papers, official forms with county letterheads and legal stamps, violation notices for landscaping standards we had never agreed to follow, fines totaling $5,000 for unauthorized road usage, a compliance deadline of 72 hours to bring our property up to HOA architectural standards. "I never signed any agreement with your HOA," I said, scanning the ridiculous demands. "Paint color approval for our house, tree trimming requirements for our natural forest, lawn maintenance standards for property that had been rural farmland for decades." "Your signature is not required," Karen replied smoothly. "County ordinances supersede individual preferences when community standards are at stake." The inspection took 2 hours. They photographed everything. The natural landscaping Grandpa had maintained for 30 years, the original farmhouse that had sheltered 4 generations of our family, the workshop where my great-grandfather had built furniture by hand. Every detail was documented like evidence in a criminal case. After they left, I found Grandpa sitting on the porch, breathing heavily and clutching his chest. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. "Grandpa, are you okay?" "Just my heart acting up again," he said, but his voice sounded weak. "All this stress is not good for an old man." That afternoon, his condition worsened. Sharp chest pains and difficulty breathing sent us rushing toward the hospital. But the fence blocked our usual route, forcing us to take the long way around through back roads that added 20 crucial minutes to our journey. The emergency room doctor was not encouraging. "Stress is a major factor in heart problems at his age," she explained. "The isolation and harassment you are describing could literally be life-threatening for someone with his condition." While Grandpa rested in the hospital bed, I drove home to find more cars in our driveway. Neighbors from throughout the area had gathered for an impromptu meeting. Word was spreading about what the HOA was doing, and people were starting to connect the dots. "They hit us with the same tactics last year," explained Tom Baker, whose family had farmed in the area for 40 years. "Sudden violations for property that had been fine for decades. Legal threats that would cost more to fight than to comply with. My mother sold her house for $30,000 below market value just to escape the harassment," added Sarah Chen, whose elderly mother had lived peacefully in the area until Karen Matthews decided her property needed to be part of the community expansion. For 2 hours, we shared stories and compared tactics. The pattern was clear and methodical. Karen Matthews had developed a system for forcing out longtime residents and replacing them with HOA-compliant properties that raised everyone else's property values. Then Karen herself arrived. She walked into our meeting with 2 lawyers in expensive suits and a briefcase full of legal documents. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "How nice to see everyone gathered together," she said, in a voice that dripped with false warmth. "I hope you are not planning to interfere with legal property acquisitions. That would be unfortunate for everyone involved." One of her lawyers stepped forward with more papers. "Cease and desist orders for anyone who interfered with HOA operations. Threats of lawsuits for conspiracy and property interference. Legal language designed to terrify people who could not afford extended court battles." Most of our neighbors left within minutes. The few who stayed spoke in whispers about legal consequences and financial ruin. By the time Karen and her lawyers departed, our resistance meeting had dissolved into fear and isolation. That evening, I drove back to the hospital to check on Grandpa. The nurse said his condition had stabilized, but the stress was clearly taking its toll. As I sat beside his bed, he reached over and squeezed my hand. "There is something I need to tell you," he said quietly. "Something that might help with our situation." "What is it, Grandpa?" "I still have my old bulldozer in the back barn. The one I used for construction work before I retired. Still runs like new." I stared at him, not sure I had heard correctly. "Your bulldozer?" "67 Caterpillar D6, he said with the first smile I had seen from him in days. "Been keeping it in perfect condition for 30 years. Never know when you might need to move some earth." The way he said it, with that glint in his eye, made me realize he was not just talking about moving earth. He was talking about moving obstacles. Dawn brought the sound of heavy machinery rumbling down our road. I rushed outside to find 2 commercial trucks parked beside the fence, unloading concrete barriers and electronic gate systems. HOA contractors were installing permanent fortifications that would make the wooden fence look like a garden decoration. The lead contractor, a weathered man in a hard hat, looked uncomfortable when I approached. "Sorry about this," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Orders from the county. We are just doing our job." "This is our private road," I protested, but the words felt hollow now. Legal documents trumped family history. Official permits overruled generational ownership. Within hours, concrete barriers 3 feet high stretched across the road. Electronic gates with keypads and cameras turned our family access into a controlled checkpoint. Warning signs in multiple languages threatened prosecution for unauthorized entry. I watched our freedom disappear, one concrete block at a time. That afternoon brought another certified letter, this one demanding $40,000 in retroactive road maintenance fees. 5 years of alleged county services, plus interest and penalties for late payment. The letter gave us 30 days to pay or face property seizure proceedings. I called every lawyer in the county phone book. Most would not even return my calls. The few who did speak with me gave the same advice: pay the fees, comply with the regulations, or prepare for a legal battle that would bankrupt us. HOAs have unlimited legal resources, one attorney explained. They can file motions and appeals until you run out of money, then foreclose on your property for unpaid legal fees. I have seen it happen dozens of times. The next morning, Grandpa collapsed during his usual walk around the property. I found him on the ground near the old oak tree, clutching his chest and gasping for breath. His face was gray and his pulse was weak and irregular. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes, but the paramedics had to park at the fence and carry their equipment half a mile to reach him. Every precious second counted with a heart attack, and the HOA fence was literally costing us life-saving time. At the hospital, the doctor pulled me aside with grim news. "Your grandfather is stable, but his heart is under severe stress. The isolation and harassment are directly affecting his health. He needs regular medical care, social interaction, and reduced stress levels." "The HOA has us trapped on our own property," I explained. "He cannot get to his regular appointments or see his friends." The doctor shook her head sadly. "Then you need to find a solution quickly. This level of stress could kill him." That afternoon, as I sat beside Grandpa's hospital bed, Karen Matthews walked into the room like she owned the place. She carried a briefcase and wore the same cold smile that had become her trademark. "I heard about the medical emergency," she said with fake concern. "How unfortunate that your grandfather is having health problems." She opened her briefcase and pulled out more legal papers. "This might be a good time to discuss relocation options. We have identified several assisted living facilities that would be perfect for someone in his condition." The papers she handed me were eviction notices. 30 days to vacate our property for violations of HOA architectural standards. Failure to comply would result in foreclosure proceedings and forced sale. "You are serving legal papers in a hospital room?" I asked, hardly believing what I was seeing. "Business does not stop for personal inconvenience," Karen replied smoothly. "Your grandfather clearly needs professional medical care that your current living situation cannot provide." After she left, I sat in stunned silence. They were not just taking our road. They were taking our home, our land, our family heritage, everything my great-grandfather had built, everything Grandpa had maintained for 70 years, everything that connected us to our past and our identity. That evening, I drove home to find HOA security cameras mounted on poles along the fence line. Motion sensors and floodlights turned our private property into a surveillance zone. They were watching our every move now, documenting our activities like we were criminals in our own home. I found Grandpa's hospital clothes in the laundry and noticed something else among his belongings: keys. Heavy brass keys attached to a chain with a small Bulldozer keychain. That night, I walked out to the old barn behind our house. I had not been inside in years, but the smell of motor oil and steel brought back childhood memories of helping Grandpa with maintenance work. In the back corner, covered by a heavy tarp, sat the most beautiful machine I had ever seen. A 1967 Caterpillar D6 bulldozer, painted in classic yellow with black trim. Every surface had been maintained perfectly. The blade was sharp and clean. The engine looked like it had been rebuilt yesterday. I climbed into the operator seat and ran my hands over the controls. This was not just a machine. This was an instrument of justice that had been waiting 30 years for the right moment. When Grandpa came home from the hospital 2 days later, I was waiting with the keys in my hand. "Tell me about this bulldozer," I said. His tired eyes suddenly sparkled with life. "Been waiting for you to ask that question," he said. "Let me show you what she can do." That evening, Grandpa and I spread the original 1952 property surveys across the kitchen table, alongside recent county maps and satellite images. What we discovered changed everything. "Look at this boundary line," Grandpa said, pointing to a precise mark on the old survey. "Our property extends 12 feet past where they built that fence." I measured the distances carefully, comparing the original surveyor marks with current aerial photos. The fence was not just blocking our road access. It was built entirely on our legally owned land. "They are trespassing," I whispered, hardly believing what the documents showed. 2 feet onto our property on the north side, even more on the south," Grandpa confirmed. "That fence is an unauthorized structure built on private land without permission." The next morning, I contacted the county surveyor who had worked on recent boundary disputes in our area. He agreed to come out and verify the property lines using GPS coordinates and the original survey markers. What he found was even better than we had hoped. The HOA fence violated our property boundaries by an average of 2.5 feet along its entire length. Every post, every board, every concrete barrier was an illegal encroachment on our family land. "You have every legal right to remove unauthorized structures from your property," the surveyor explained as he prepared his official report. "State law is very clear about protecting property owners from encroachment." I spent that afternoon researching statutes about removing unauthorized structures from private property. The law was surprisingly straightforward. Property owners had broad rights to protect their land from trespassers and unauthorized construction. While I researched legal precedents, Grandpa worked in the barn with the bulldozer. I could hear the engine running as he performed routine maintenance checks. Oil changes, hydraulic fluid tests, blade adjustments. Every system was tested and certified perfect. "Still got my equipment operator license," he said proudly, showing me a card that would not expire for another 3 years. 45 years of moving earth teaches you how to handle heavy machinery. We planned our approach for early Sunday morning. The HOA offices would be closed. Karen Matthews would be at her country club, according to neighbors who had tracked her weekend routine. Most importantly, we would have several hours before anyone could organize a response. I set up cameras to document everything, multiple angles showing the property boundary markers, close-up shots of the fence encroaching on our land, video evidence of the surveyor report confirming our legal rights. "This has to be perfect," I told Grandpa as we reviewed our plan. "No mistakes, no excessive damage, no legal vulnerabilities." "Son, I have been operating heavy equipment since before you were born," he replied with quiet confidence. "I know exactly how to remove a fence without damaging anything we want to keep." Saturday evening, we walked the fence line together, marking exactly which sections crossed our property boundaries. Grandpa studied each post and concrete barrier with the practiced eye of someone who had built and demolished structures for 30 years. "The wooden sections will go easy," he explained. "The concrete barriers will take more work, but nothing this old bulldozer cannot handle." As we prepared for bed that night, Grandpa pulled me aside for a serious conversation. "Tomorrow morning, we are taking back what belongs to our family, but I want you to understand something important." "What is that, Grandpa?" "This is not about revenge or anger," he said firmly. "This is about protecting our property rights and our family heritage. We are not destroying their fence. We are removing illegal structures from our own land." He handed me a folder containing every document we had gathered: property surveys, legal research, boundary verification, photographic evidence, everything organized and ready for whatever legal challenges might follow. "Your great-grandfather built this road so our family would never be dependent on anyone else," Grandpa continued. "Tomorrow, we make sure his work was not wasted." That night I barely slept. Every few hours I would look out the window at the fence that had imprisoned us for weeks. By tomorrow evening it would be gone. Our road would be open. Our family heritage would be protected. The bulldozer sat ready in the barn, fueled and maintained and eager for its first real work in 30 years. Tomorrow, it would prove that some problems require direct solutions. The alarm rang at 5:30 on Sunday morning, but I was already awake. Through the kitchen window, I could see the first gray light of dawn touching the fence that had blocked our freedom for too long. Grandpa was already in the barn, performing final checks on the bulldozer. The engine turned over on the first try, settling into a deep rumble that seemed to shake the ground beneath our feet. 40 years of perfect maintenance had kept this machine ready for exactly this moment. "She sounds good," I said, trying to hide my nervousness. "She sounds hungry," Grandpa replied with a grin. "Been waiting 30 years to do some real work again." At exactly 6 a.m., Grandpa climbed into the operator's seat and engaged the hydraulics. The massive blade lifted smoothly, then lowered into position. Every control responded perfectly to his experienced touch. I followed on foot with cameras rolling as the yellow beast emerged from the barn like a mechanical dragon awakening from decades of slumber. The morning air filled with the scent of diesel exhaust and the promise of justice. Our first target was the wooden section of fence closest to our house. Grandpa approached slowly, giving any early-rising neighbors time to notice what was happening. The blade made contact with the first fence post with surgical precision. Wood splintered and nails squealed as the bulldozer pushed through the barrier that had imprisoned us. Grandpa worked methodically, his decades of construction experience showing in every careful movement. Each push was calculated to remove only the sections that crossed our property line. The sound of destruction carried across the countryside like a mechanical symphony. Post after post fell before the advancing blade. Boards scattered like oversized toothpicks. Warning signs crumpled into twisted metal scraps. By 6:20, word was spreading through the neighborhood. I could see people emerging from their houses, some still in pajamas, drawn by the sound of the bulldozer and the sight of the fence coming down. At 6:25, my phone started ringing. Unknown numbers that I ignored while focusing on documenting every moment of our property liberation. The cameras captured everything: the precise removal of encroaching structures, the careful preservation of property boundary markers, the systematic restoration of our family road access. Karen Matthews arrived at 6:47, her luxury sedan sliding to a stop beside the growing pile of fence debris. She climbed out of her car in what looked like designer workout clothes, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. "Stop this immediately," she screamed over the sound of the bulldozer engine. "You are destroying HOA property." I walked over with the surveyor report in my hand. "Actually, we are removing unauthorized structures from our private property. Every piece of this fence is built on land that belongs to our family." "I am calling the police," she shouted, pulling out her phone. "Please do," I replied calmly. We have all the documentation they will need to verify our property rights. The police arrived at 7:15, two patrol cars with lights flashing. Officer Martinez, whom I recognized from community events, approached cautiously as Grandpa continued his methodical work. "We got reports of property destruction," Officer Martinez said, consulting his notepad. I handed him our folder of documents: property surveys, boundary verification, legal research about removing unauthorized structures from private land, everything organized and official. Officer Martinez studied the papers carefully, then walked the fence line with his partner, comparing the survey markers with the bulldozer's path of destruction. After 20 minutes of investigation, he returned with an official conclusion. "Everything appears to be legal," he announced to Karen Matthews, who was packing like a caged animal. "They are removing structures from their own property, which is within their rights as landowners." "This is outrageous," Karen sputtered. "The HOA will file lawsuits. We will pursue criminal charges." "Ma'am, you are welcome to contact your attorneys," Officer Martinez replied professionally. "But based on these survey documents, no laws are being broken here." By 8 a.m., the spectacle had drawn a crowd. Neighbors lined the road with coffee cups and cell phones, many recording videos of the fence destruction. Social media posts were already spreading the story across the county. "Good for you," shouted Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street. "About time someone stood up to these HOA bullies." Other voices joined in support. Applause and cheers accompanied each section of fence that fell to the bulldozer blade. Our individual act of property protection was becoming a community celebration of resistance against institutional overreach. The concrete barriers required more work, but Grandpa attacked them with the same methodical precision. The bulldozer blade scraped against concrete and steel, gradually loosening the permanent structures that had seemed so imposing just hours earlier. By 9:30, news vans were arriving. Local television crews set up cameras to capture the continuing destruction of what they were already calling the fence that trapped a family. Reporters interviewed neighbors and documented the growing pile of HOA debris. Grandpa worked steadily through the morning, pausing only for water breaks and to let the engine cool. 3 hours of continuous operation reduced the imposing barrier to scattered lumber and broken concrete. Every post that had crossed our property line was systematically removed. At 10:45, the last concrete barrier crashed to the ground. Our family road was open for the first time in weeks. Grandpa shut down the bulldozer engine, and sudden silence fell over the crowd of spectators. The applause started slowly, then built into sustained cheering from dozens of neighbors who had gathered to witness our victory. Grandpa climbed down from the operator's seat, his face flushed with exertion and satisfaction. "Road is open," he announced simply. The HOA's attempts to file criminal charges collapsed within 48 hours. Their attorneys discovered what we already knew: removing unauthorized structures from your own property is not a crime. Karen Matthews' threats of lawsuits evaporated when faced with our surveyor documentation and legal research. Local news coverage turned Grandpa into an overnight folk hero. The story of a 78-year-old man reclaiming his family heritage with a bulldozer captured imaginations across the region. Interview requests poured in from newspapers, radio stations, and television programs. "Sometimes you have to stand up for what is right," Grandpa told Channel 7 News, sitting proudly beside his bulldozer. "This land has been in our family for 60 years. No HOA bureaucrat is going to change that." The media attention brought unexpected allies. Three other families who had been pressured by similar HOA tactics contacted us with their own stories. Property boundary disputes, forced architectural compliance, retroactive fee demands. The pattern of harassment was systematic and widespread. A county investigation launched within the week. Reporters had uncovered evidence of questionable land acquisitions, suspicious permit approvals, and possibly fraudulent documentation. The same tactics used against our family had been deployed against dozens of property owners throughout the region. Karen Matthews resigned from the HOA board on Thursday, citing personal reasons and external pressures. Neighbors reported moving trucks at her house the following weekend. The resignation letter, leaked to local media, blamed unreasonable property owners and media harassment for her decision to step down. The county review of our road transfer took 6 weeks, but the conclusion was inevitable. The original acquisition had been based on incorrect information about road ownership and maintenance history. Full ownership of our family road was officially restored, with written apologies from 3 different county departments. Grandpa's health improved dramatically once the stress and isolation ended. His regular medical appointments resumed without obstacle. Weekly coffee meetings with neighbors returned to normal. The surveillance cameras and motion sensors disappeared as quietly as they had appeared. The Bulldozer earned a place of honor in our barn, positioned where visitors could admire its yellow paint and gleaming blade. Grandpa maintained it carefully, joking that you never know when mechanical justice might be needed again. 6 months later, we installed our own gate system at the entrance to our property. Solar-powered cameras and intercom systems provided security without restricting access for emergency vehicles or family needs. The design respected our privacy while maintaining our responsibility as good neighbors. Property values in our area stabilized once the HOA harassment campaigns ended. The 3 families who had been forced to sell their homes found buyers who appreciated rural privacy and family heritage over cookie-cutter community standards. The story became legend in our county. Coffee shops and barber shops still buzz with conversations about the morning. A bulldozer opened a family road and closed a chapter on institutional bullying. Children who hear the story grow up believing that sometimes ordinary people can defeat powerful organizations through preparation, determination, and the courage to act when action is necessary. Our family road remains open today, maintained by our own hands just as my great-grandfather intended. The bulldozer sits ready in the barn, a mechanical guardian of property rights and family heritage. Some problems require direct solutions. Sometimes justice arrives on steel tracks with a diesel engine and a blade that cuts through more than wood and concrete. Sometimes it cuts through decades of accumulated bureaucratic arrogance to reveal the simple truth that this land belongs to the people who built it, who maintained it, and who love it enough to fight for it.